What's going on, y'all? KM Best here, your favorite 69th ranked Marvel snapper, here with an early White Widow build that was very successful for me in High Infinite. This is the build. It is an adaptation of a previous Clog deck that I played and the Jimmy Dickens and Butt collaboration that has been making the rounds in High Infinite. The major thing that it's doing is fusing the Mysterio and Mockingbird plan into the Professor X Cannonball Sentry Annihilus plan. And I think that is a very valuable thing to be doing, especially when so much of the early metagame around a new card involves playing with and against that new card at a high level. To me, this strikes me as a very similar deck to the deck that was showcased on the tier list recently, except instead of going for a pixie game plan, because there are less 1-drops in this build, this deck is instead going for a more consistent mid-range plan. Effectively, the ethos of this deck is just playing a bunch of very good cards. And I know I say that about a lot of different decks, but it is especially true here. This is a true lockdown deck, but it's not a lockdown deck that doesn't have stats. This deck can compete for stats with so many different decks, and White Widow is a big part of that. White Widow is effectively a 2/6 when you play this deck, or she is a 2-clog your opponent. You are very okay with either of those things. But one thing that you might not have known is that the way White Widow is a 2/6 is, based on what time in the game that it is. Most of the time, they're not going to get rid of that -4 power until the last turn of the game. What that means for you is that White Widow is an incredibly powerful priority tool. This is a card that is effectively going to be a 2/6 on its location during the turns you are looking to play Professor X, and when you play Professor X on this card's location, you are going to be in a situation where they can't fill it up. And that is unbelievable. So this deck uses White Widow both ways. It is a 2/6 that you Prof X on top of, and it is also part of your Clog game plan. Now, that Clog game plan gives you a reasonable advantage into combo decks like Hela and Phoenix Force, but frankly, those decks are on the decline because of the decks like this that really prey on them. The real question for a deck like this is, how does it match up into other decks doing similar stuff? And how does it match up into the Angela decks? And how does it do when you are playing against something like Destroy? Let's talk about it. Compared to something like the baseline Pixie deck, which is running Nico Minoru, Iceman, Lady Deathstrike, things of that nature, this deck has more ability to slam the door shut. A lot of this is due to the inclusion of Daredevil and Cannonball and Professor X. Many people have been asking about Cannonball recently, and I think he is unfortunately exactly as good as advertised. This deck is to some degree built around Cannonball. If you are going to play a non-Cannonball version of this, I suspect it might involve the card Dr. Octopus, but it will involve some other changes as well. One of the major interactions this deck is looking to enable is clogging your opponent, winning one lane guaranteed, either via Clog thanks to White Widow and Debris, or via Professor X, and then using Cannonball, often with an additional Mockingbird or a Demon from the Hood, in order to win another lane. This is a very straightforward, very powerful playstyle, and Cannonball is a big part of it. This line does give it reasonable matchups into a lot of the Angela decks. Straight up, you can beat this stuff. You are competitive for power with the best decks in the game, the Angela decks. That is a big deal. Those decks are predicated on being the best stats decks, and they are not going to be that when you are playing into them. Now, one thing you do end up missing is a lot of actual tech. You're relying on your Clog to keep your opponent's points down near your level, as opposed to something like Shang-Chi. Right now, this has proven to be a more effective strategy because so many decks are already built to dodge Shang-Chi, but this is not a permanent state of affairs. Finally, against Destroy, the inclusion of Professor X and Daredevil is really going to show what it can do. You are generally not a favored matchup into Destroy, just because of all the things you're giving them that they are very easily able to get rid of and profit off of. You are not a very good Clog deck in that matchup. You are a very good Professor X deck, though, and you are an even better Daredevil Professor X deck. which means that your effective bad matchup becomes one that is much closer to being draw dependent than you always losing. Daredevil, Cannonball, Mockingbird, or a demon can absolutely win you those kind of games. The Hood is a key component of this deck, as he is a key component of the Annihilus package, which of course is Hood, Sentry, and Annihilus. You have multiple ways of clogging your opponent. You do not have to be a Sentry Annihilus deck every game. You can be plenty of other things when you play this, but the Hood is almost always your best play on turn 1. You are very happy to play the Hood out, hit it on turn 1, and feel great about your life, because you are then able to either save that demon or play that demon, depending on whether you're worried about Killmonger, and then just sort of go about your business, get rid of that Hood either with a Carnage or with a Annihilus, and just generally feel like you effectively played like 2 energy, 9 power, which is extremely powerful, not even taking into account the fact that it clogs your opponent. Carnage is a fairly important card for this deck right now because it leans into being a Mockingbird deck. And when you lean into being a Mockingbird deck with the inclusion of something like Mysterio, and in addition to debris, you end up needing ways to clean up your board. Now, you do have to think about like, okay, how expensive am I willing to make this Mockingbird if I eat a Mysterio and a debris rock here? That is the thing you're going to end up eating a lot with this Carnage. You have to think about, what if I get the Mockingbird here? How do I prioritize that? Another thing you're going to want to think about with Carnage is your Mysterio placement, right? And this affects a lot of the cards because Carnage's other role in this deck is when you didn't draw Annihilus, it eats all the bad stuff, right? So you didn't draw Annihilus, it eats a Hood and a Sentry Void, and suddenly you're competitive in that lane in a way you otherwise would not be. And that means that you need to plan for those eventualities. If you have a Sentry in your hand, a Carnage in your hand, and a Mysterio, you're often not going to want to play the Mysterio on the right lane because that's where the Sentry Void is going to go, and you might have to Carnage that later. So thinking about stuff like that, thinking about how to best mitigate the risk inherent in this game plan. And there is a lot of risk inherent in this game plan when you are not playing Annihilus. One of the cool things about Annihilus is he gets rid of all the risk to playing this game plan. Just completely, there is no risk anymore. You are 100% fine to do whatever it is you want. Without that card in your hand, you have to plan for potential downsides, and that means planning for Carnage. Daredevil is excellent right now. It gives you real ways to win what otherwise would be 50-50s, and you need real ways to win those games because hitting a Daredevil into a Cannonball, Daredevil Profex Cannonball is the new Daredevil Profex Goliath. Like, what are we talking about here? It is exactly that good, maybe better, because of the fact that you can be behind and still win. Like, instead of Goliath, we now have a card, like, it is a little easier to play around. It's not as game-ending as it, but in most cases, it is absolutely as game-ending. So, like, there are situations where your destroy opponent can play Null and Death, and you can't really do anything about that with the Cannonball. That totally happens. When you're not within 8, that totally happens. But it is very reminiscent of a Profex Goliath deck, and Daredevil is, of course, very important to that because you just want to lock them down and get your wins. You are going to end up snapping early with Daredevil a lot, and you can get punished for that, but you really don't want to be snapping on Daredevil most of the time because a lot of opponents will just realize, I'm dead. You use the Daredevil to set up the situation where they're dead, but hopefully you've snapped before then so the stakes are raised. So White Widow's role in this deck is mostly just being good. This is not a card that you're like need to play in order to play this archetype. I would say you could try replacing it with, like, if you don't have White Widow, you could try replace Carnage with Pixie, play another 1-drop kind of thing, probably Nico Minoru. Like, you could try a bunch of stuff instead of that, but I am fairly convinced that White Widow is just great here. This is a deck that is very built for her, right? You get these sort of turn 5 games when you don't have Professor X. You can do something like Debris White Widow and just full clog your opponent. You can do things like that on, like, you can just like end a game on that if they've played enough cards. You can do things even without Daredevil that are incredibly powerful with her. Fundamentally, she is either a 2/6 in this deck, or she is a 2 and you clogged your opponent, and you are interested in both of those things. You're interested in either of her states, and whether she's in her success state or her fail state, well, actually, the definition of that will depend based on the situation that you're in. but man, this card is excellent here. I've been going on and on about a lot of the cards in this deck. I don't think I need to go on and on about Jeff at all. You are a Clog deck. The one tip I will give you about Jeff is I typically play him later. If I have any other option for 2-drop that makes any amount of sense, I would much rather hold Jeff and catch someone by surprise by putting it in a Professor X lane. That's how I play the game. I don't know if that's how you necessarily should play the game. It's obviously safer to play Jeff earlier. I am trying to go for, you know, some scammy, oh, they think I don't have it kind of deals, right? And that is a strategy that is valid with this deck, but I think that's sort of a matter of taste with how you play Jeff. That's just how I play it. Mysterio is part of the spice in here. This is a deck that, while there are many Sentry, Annihilus, Prophex, Cannonball decks out there, what we're doing here is leaning into two things with Mysterio. The first is managing priority. The second is Mockingbird. Mysterio, when you play it, will discount Mockingbird by 3. That's nuts. This is a 2/4 that discounts Mockingbird by 3. That's like fundamentally what's going on here, right? When you play a Debris and a Mysterio, your Mockingbird is free. That's really good. Obviously, a free 9 is messed up. Like, this is a deck that reminds me very much of playing Thanos. Like, it has those same type of just like, oh my god, that is super messed up. You have your Prophex games where you just lock them down, play a Cannonball. You have your games where your Mockingbird is just 9 power, you play a bunch of stuff. This is like that. And playing Mysterio is very critical to that, I think. I am a big fan of Mysterio. He does sort of necessitate the Carnage because of just like, you don't really want to clog yourself, right? But the Carnage is even good right now because there are a lot of people playing decks like this, which means Carnage has a lot of targets basically no matter what. And people are giving you stuff. They're playing Goblins. They're sending stuff over with Annihilus. And it's just like, dude, that is a free Mockingbird for me. And I don't care about it because I can get rid of all that stuff on the same turn I play the Mockingbird. This is a really strong thing to be doing. Debris is very solid right now, and in as much as these decks arrived in the metagame as sort of answers to things like Hela and Phoenix Force that are like trying to constrict based on that, like the original versions of this deck that I was playing were very much like, I'm going to clog you up so you can't play the card Hela in a profitable way, and you can still do that. But the thing that has arrived in this metagame is the knowledge that Debris, White Widow, Annihilus stuff, like, that's just enough to win games. You can just win games off that. You are taking away a massive amount of power when you are taking away 1 to 2 board spots on your opponent's board every single game. And because of Mockingbird, you're seeing benefits to your cards after that. And your whole deck is predicated on this Clog into Cannonball thing, which without Debris, you are just a Prophex Cannonball deck. But with Debris, you can just clog people anyway. Like, you can just play, like, you know, Debris and White Widow, and they might just, like, have 2 cards in that lane, and it's just like, oh, okay, they can't play there. Now you're going to win another lane with Cannonball. You're going to win that lane with something else big. Done. Game's over, right? And that kind of stuff is just very dumb. The Sentry Annihilus package is probably a little bit too good not to run, although I would be interested in seeing what this deck looked like without Sentry Annihilus, if only because, like, it is, of course, very telegraphed, but you can take advantage of how telegraphed it is by just, like, playing the Sentry somewhere and then saying, you know what, I'm not going to worry about Annihilusing that lane. I'm just going to win the other 2 lanes. They have to play into that lane. The fact that they have to play into that lane means I can Professor X something else, because if they don't play into that lane, I'm Annihilusing them, and it's just a very awkward pin to catch your opponent in. And yeah, that's a pretty good thing to do, even when you are not doing Sentry Annihilus, which, like, obviously, if you can actually pull that off, that's extremely messed up. This card is great right now. You're going to play a lot of Annihilus mirrors. I have a couple tips for managing them. The number one thing you're going to want to think about is priority. Like, that's level 1 of Annihilus mirrors is I want to Annihilus second, and if I Annihilus second, I'm going to win. Sure, you're right. The other thing you're going to want to think about, though, not just priority, but you're going to want to consider the specifics of the state of the lane you guys are sending stuff over in, right? If you send your stuff over and they end up Annihilusing on turn 6, but you can fill that lane up, you might still be able to win. And so, like, there is some real nuance to how you have to play these mirrors, how you have to think about these kind of things. Because the other thing you're going to have to think about, of course, if they have Daredevil, it's a very bad situation. If you have Daredevil, it can be a very good situation, is if you play a Sentry and you want to Annihilus, and they have priority, which is fairly likely considering just how bad it is to have a Sentry on that location. They can Professor X that location if they have priority before your Annihilus reveals. And by the same token, your Professor X deck, you have to keep the opposite in mind as well. But this kind of stuff is why part of why Daredevil is so good, because you get to just not have to worry about the 50-50 in mirrors just by running a Daredevil in your deck whenever that happens. I don't even know what to say at this point. Like, this card is so unbelievable, and I hate doing this because I feel like what I'm doing is like, I'm setting people up to be like, Cam, you said this card wasn't going to be very good. And, all I can say is, like, I was wrong. I thought this card would be okay. And there's a bunch of stuff that happened, right? Like, they nerfed Annihilus, Professor X became a really big thing. I get it, right? There are excuses for why I was wrong on this. It's hard to predict the future. I'm not going to beat myself up over it. But I do think it's very clear that this is an extremely good card. And I just wanted to be full-throated in that, because it's like, there's a reason why I typically do not do card reviews before the cards come out, except on the podcast. I don't do like a video that says this card is going to be busted, here are the best things to do with it, until I've actually had a chance to play with it. And sometimes it takes longer than the chance I have to play with it to figure out a card is actually good. And I think Cannonball is one of those situations where it's like, sometimes a card will just take longer, right? You're watching a video right now that is about a card that just came out. And I am confident this deck is good, but I am not 100% confident White Widow is why this deck is good. So, like, we'll get to that a bit later, but it's like, it's hard to extricate a card from the shell it's being played in, right? And a lot of things happened that made Cannonball better. The nerf to Eliath, probably chief among them, but a lot of things changed. And when a lot of things change, it's very easy for predictions to be wrong. So this is me talking to you saying, hey, take it a little less seriously, please, because anyone who is telling you they 100% know how good a card is before it comes out, they may not be lying, but they're guessing. That's what it is. It's a guess. That's why it's called theory crafting and not fact crafting. So please, please, please do understand that you need to like consume this kind of content with a grain of salt. And I am shoveling that salt on my own content. I am really trying to get this through to you, because there are a bunch of people out there who will tell you, oh my God, this card is busted, or oh my God, this card sucks. And look, it just takes time sometimes. And Cannonball is one of those times where it just took time. This card is really strong. However, I will say, you are going to want to play him in Professor X decks. You are very often going to want to play him in Sentry Annihilus decks. And I think both of those are probably higher priority targets than Cannonball. But that said, he's very good. That's the only thing I can say. Mockingbird has people have sort of forgotten about her, right? Like when you think about like the cards from her season that are really shining, you have Pixie that's really rising up right now. You have Cannonball that's really rising up right now. And Mockingbird, lest we forget, was the absolute best of these cards. Mockingbird was better than Hope Summers, better than Pixie, better than Cannonball. It was the best card in the best deck. And I think one of the things I've been thinking about for a while is, how do you find the next best Mockingbird deck? And I think this is a really compelling argument for it. Between Mysterio, Debris, the Clog stuff that's happening in the meta right now, the fact that you get discounted for the Sentry Void, you get discounted for the Demon off of the Hood, all the stuff you're doing, you just effectively end up making this card like 1 or 0 a lot of the time. And the main breakpoint you're going to want to hit is 1 when you're trying to play it on the final turn of the game, because a lot of the way this deck ends games is, 5+1. And if that 1 can be a Mockingbird, that's obviously phenomenal. If that can get to 0 and suddenly you can do like Cannonball, Demon, Mockingbird final turn, yeah, that's obviously insanely messed up. That's like one of the most messed up things you've ever done in Marvel Snap. And Mockingbird is a big part of that. She is just great, not Shang-Chi-able. I mean, like, I can't say enough good things about this card in this shell. We invested in her, and she is paying off dividends. Finally, I wanted to shout out 3 people who were instrumental in the creation of this deck. They are Jimmy Dickens, Butt, and Big Baby. The deck sort of originated with Jimmy Dickens about a week ago, just adding the Mockingbird package into the Pixie Mobius stuff. And since then has sort of gone through a bunch of iterations. The Daredevil edition was from Butt, and then Big Baby took my old Clog deck and put the Carnage stuff in there, and so now we are finally at this point with it. I think without those people, I would not have arrived at this early. This feels like a very refined deck to be on this early in the metagame. I could be wrong about that, of course. I mean, like I said, it's a lot of guessing, but this does feel like a very refined thing to be doing, a very powerful thing to be doing. And this early in the metagame, it's like it does feel like it might be a step ahead of the other things people are doing with this card. So should you buy White Widow? I think my answer would be, if you own the other cards in this deck, it's probably a good idea to buy White Widow. If not, I think there are likely higher priority targets. Now, in this deck alone, Sentry, Annihilus, Cannonball, these are all higher priority targets. In this deck alone, Mockingbird, you can argue, I think Mockingbird is great here, but she's more spice. But if you're trying to play this kind of stuff, if you're trying to play like a White Widow deck without Annihilus, don't do that, right? Like, this is a card that goes with Clog. You need Annihilus for Clog. You probably need Cannonball for Clog. And that makes me feel like she's a little bit more limited than I was sort of afraid of. I think she's exactly as strong as I thought she was. But she's more like the Clog X23 than she is like a card that goes everywhere. So, are you a Clog gamer? That's a really good question. Are you someone who has the other tools you need to play this card? That's a really good question, because I think she is undeniably just like, this is very good, but it is very good as part of a package. Now, of that package, I think she's one of the better cards, and I think it is possible you will find more use for her than some other things. Like, you'll find more use for this card outside of pure Clog than you will X23 outside of Destroy or Discard, right? But I'm not sure that's necessarily enough to buy her. Now, she is just sort of fundamentally a 2/6. So if you're doing things that restrict your opponent's play in any real way, this is a card you're going to want to look into. Like a Sandman, right? She's better Lizard. In any Clog deck, she's obviously incredible. But outside of that, I think the main argument for getting her is the one thing that I noticed about her is she is very devastating on certain locations. Like, she is the kind of card that instantly wins stuff like Cloning Vats, stuff like Bar Sinister, stuff like Asgard, actually. All the locations that like have like a turn 4 time limit on them, Eternity Range, she's unbelievable on. Like, there are a lot of things where she's just like, I'm going to win you this location on my own right now. And so she is good for that too. So in terms of rating this card, I would say this is a 4 out of 5. But it's a 4 out of 5 that is conditional on the other cards in its archetype to really, truly shine. If you want to buy it and you have all the other cards, I think you should go for it. But if you're missing something like Annihilus or you're missing something like Cannonball, you have a higher priority target, in my opinion, right now. We'll see how this shakes out, because she is very powerful. That is just my read right now. Remember, it's been one day. Probably less than that, actually, by the time this video comes out. Please, 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 if you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. Please wait a few days before spending caches. At least wait until the weekend quests drop and make a more informed decision. I can tell you what I think right now, but as Cannonball proves, that is not going to be 100% reliable. The best way to get a reliable estimate is wait for people to have a greater understanding of the shape of the card. Very, very difficult to do, I know, but please don't get sucked in to the way this economy operates and like end up blowing caches on something that you don't have the other tools to use. Make sure she's what you want. I'm probably going to be doing a tier list of Series 5 purchases sooner than later. And hopefully that will be helpful to people in this situation too, because I gotta say, it legitimately breaks my heart when I go into the comments and people are like, I'm missing this card from this deck, I can't play it. And it's like, it really sucks, because I don't know. I'm gonna start rambling at this point, so I'm gonna cut myself off. But it sucks, and I'm sorry. I really wish the economy was better. I really do. And I really hope that it does get better. But for now, what you need to do is work in the confines of it. Don't gamble 1 or 2 caches on this stuff. Don't do that. Wait till you have 4. Pick and choose your right cards. Build for a deck, not by card. And I think in this case, White Widow is very strong in a deck, but it can go in, it is possible that it ends up being more widely applicable, but not necessarily likely. All right, y'all. I'm sorry I unloaded on y'all like my therapist over there about the economy stuff. I just feel like I've been getting a lot more comments recently about like, I can't play this deck. And it's like, I am here to give you the best decks in the metagame. And I think this is the best deck for White Widow. And to me, it does kind of suck that like, you know, this is the best deck for White Widow, but if you don't have Cannonball, you probably can't play it. Like that sucks, right? Like I don't exactly know what to do about that bad feeling. I really wish I could, because in Magic the Gathering, one of the things that is most closest to me in terms of content is budget content. But one of the things that a lot of budget content gets wrong is it says, here are the budget replacements for these good cards. And that's a terrible way to go about it. You don't want to play a budget replacement for something good, because then you're playing something bad. What you want to do is play a deck that you can afford. And that's the hard thing. And that's what I wanted to, like, that is the thing that bugs the hell out of me. It's like, no, there's no replacement for Cannonball, because that's not how this works. What you want to do is build toward a deck and then play that deck a lot if you're on a budget. I think Destroy is a pretty good example of a deck you can build toward that also gives you a card like Nico that can branch out into other archetypes later. Like, that is sort of my thought process. You could build towards that. You could build towards the Angela core. You could build towards that kind of stuff. That's how you should approach this stuff. And it, like, I do legitimately, it kind of breaks my heart when I see this stuff, because I wish there was something I could do. I really do. And right now, the best I can do is give you advice and the tools to deal with it. And so that's part of what the back end of this video kind of turned into. I'm sorry. As far as the deck, it is absolutely phenomenal. I definitely do recommend it. And thank you so much for watching. We're going to jump for some gameplay here, so you can see this deck in action in High Infinite. As always, I've been Cam Best. You've been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one. Okay. I hope that's helpful to you in your endeavors involving Arishem. Was that you censoring out the answer? What do you mean? I said very clearly that he was... That was very clear. How did you not understand what I was saying? That seems so straightforward to me. I don't get you guys. He's trying to give us hints. Yep. It's very obvious. Yeah, I said that Arishem is... How do you guys not understand this? Just got here. How's White Widow been so far? Do me a favor. Tell me how long I've been streaming. So they clearly are bouncing, right? This is like a bounce angle. They're doing a bounce angle here, right? Oh, sure, yeah, they got my Carnage. Wait, no, that's not my Carnage. They just have the same split? Nice. I don't know how they're still in this game. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to snap it here. But they're dead. They're so dead. Like, they can just leave for 2. I'm just going to see what they have first. Iceman and Beast, huh? Yeah, they're fucking the most dead of all time. Get out of here. Wow. They do not think they're dead. I'm freaked out by that. What the fuck am I missing, dude? What am I missing? Nothing. I'm missing nothing. Oh my god. Oh my god. I can't be sure, but it is what it feels like to me. If I can only get one check at Cannonball or Mockingbird, that's really close. I'm not going to lie. If I had to guess, I would say Cannonball. Well, they can't Galactus that lane, so I guess I'm not sure what is happening, right? What is happening? What is this? Neil? I don't want to kneel. My god, dude. I forgot I had the Daredevil. I should have snapped this for sure. See, I was thinking about playing the Mockingbird last turn, so I always had priority and couldn't get Professor X. But, I mean, are you really about the Professor X into this fucking shit? That seems insane to me. Shang-Chi, Ravonna, White Widow, 2 cards in hand. So what we're going to do here is this. And they are dead as hell. Maybe the most dead anyone has ever been. Let me play this too. We'll have 1 Mysterio, 2 Mysterio, plus a discount, so she'll still end up costing 2 next turn. So our next turn will be Mysterio, Demon, Mockingbird, right? She'll cost 3 down to 2? Yeah, okay. Absolutely not. Get the fuck out of here. Wow. Wow. You gotta respect that. You play that, they don't get the kiss? I know. they're fucking leaving after this shit anyway. You know what I mean? They're gone. Watch them counter Annie. That is what we're playing around here, right? Holy shit. Counter Annie. Love it. Yeah, no. That's a fucking casserole for 8 cubes. Not even a little bit. But yeah, in case you didn't notice, chat, the first play we made was putting 2 things there. That was like the thing that was always happening, was putting 2 things there so they couldn't counter Annie us. Like, we were never, ever, ever letting this shit happen. There was a brief moment where I was sitting there like, what if I accept the green goblin back, right? And I did the math on that, and it was like, no, if they play the Annihilus in that lane, we die, right? So we had to get rid of it. People think of that in a vacuum, and they maybe shouldn't, because yes, Cannonball turned out to be extremely powerful. However, a big part of that is the sheer existence of the deletion, I should say, of the card Goliath. A very large part of that is the deletion of the card Goliath. Don't mind if I do. Don't mind if I do. They're Goblin deck, aren't they? I guess I still win that. Now, if I'm them, I play the Red Guardian to get rid of the Daredevil. Yeah. You go like Red Guardian Kitty here to get rid of Daredevil. You cannot abide that shit existing, I think. Yeah. Hope, Havoc, Kitty Pride. Perfect. All right, so they have 1,000,000 energy next turn. They have 7 energy. Havoc is effectively at 12 on that right lane. Do they have something big enough? Cannonball this over here, right? This is what it would be. It'd be Cannonball in the middle. Mockingbird goes over here. 4 plus 9 is 13. We go to 19. Maybe. No, 19. They are at 4 plus 5. 8, 9, 17. Maybe. Let's try it. Let's try it. Okay, not that. Not that. Close, but no. Not fucking Miss Marvel. That's not doing it. So I was playing around a Cannonball there. If they Cannonball mid, we need to fill this lane up so the Cannonball thing goes over here, right? With a Cannonball. I think I want to do it like this. Maybe I want to do it like this, actually, so I can... yeah, no, that was bad because of the Sentry. Where do I want a Carnage? I really needed to figure that out earlier, unfortunately. I really needed to figure that out earlier. Oh. Why would that be what happens here? Ghost Spider? Yeah. Feel like I'm gonna need like a White Widow debris turn next game, next turn, in order to take this one to a reasonable conclusion. I don't know. Issue, of course. We do clog it up. We win that lane. We win that lane. Oh, so we win the game. Because that's where real Mysterio is. So we actually just win the game. Unless they Heimdall me. Right? Heimdall moves Widow's Kissed Ghost Spider out. And Monster Craven in. So we actually beat Heimdall by playing on the left. Which we did. That happened exactly as predicted. Awk. Super awk. To the point that I almost wonder if our job here is get a min Krakoa hit. Get a min Krakoa hit, I think. Oh, they're just going to blow up the Krakoa. That's fine. I was already thinking I don't really use it very well. I'm assuming they're blowing it up, so, you know, I don't really care that I'm playing the 2 instead. Have you seen Annihilus yet? Like, what do you mean, seen? From opponent decks? Oh, yeah. We're a cannonball away from winning here, I think. We're a cannonball away from winning here. I'm fairly certain we actually just have to do this. And I hate it. I hate it so much. Of course we fucking draw it. God damn it. God damn it. I mean, if they draw the Beta Ray Bill thing, we are dead. Or if they have Jeff, we are dead. I just didn't think I could count on drawing a cannonball 1 in 8. If I had known that, I would have done way different shit. That's a lot of shit. Do they have the Beta Ray Bill guy? Rock. 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 No Beta Ray Bill guy. We win by Jeff. Let's go. We win by Jeff's amount. Reading because I think you have the Beta Ray Bill card. Fuck that. Oh, god damn it. Oh, god damn it. Oh, boy. I can't tell if we're losing prio or gaining prio here. I haven't figured it out. Okay, we have priority here. So don't we just always win? We just Profex the Necrotia and we cannot ever lose? Am I missing something? Can't snap it, but yeah. Ronin mid and then Cosmo left. Could work. But then we could just Ronin the London, right? Who gives a shit? Actually, that doesn't even win, right? They Ronin mid here. Oh, they loot cage. That does. That certainly wins. Scary, but I'm guessing that's in there instead of Cosmo? Yeah, that's a big fucking dead guy. That's a big fucking dead guy. That guy is dead as shit, bro. That guy is dead as shit, bro. Big fucking dead guy. Testing to see. I misunderstood my own priority, first of all. But the snap was effectively a method of me trying to, like, test. White Widow good? She certainly seems good. Ooh, scary. Should I mortgage my liver to get the tokens for White Widow? Time-sensitive question. You should absolutely mortgage your liver to get the tokens for White Widow. 100%. I think I want it left. How about a $10,000 loan for Snap? Should last me about a year or so of cards. Oh, for sure, man. Okay. They've killed 4 things and they have 7 energy. They've killed 4 things and they have 7 energy. 4 things, 7 energy. How are we meant to approach this situation? 7 energy, 4 things have died. They've used Venom. They could Carnage the left. Four things have died. We're looking at maybe a potential Death Killmonger. No, that would kill off their Deadpool. Let's try this. Now I feel like they're sniping. We won the tiebreaker. They were not sniping. You have Prio, so killing your demon is worth it to them. Oh, no, for sure. Just, you know, it's a little bit harder. Like, there's a reason we matched up our demon with the Deadpool there, right?